Hello and welcome
That's really
to this NFT infrastructure panel. I can't see a thing, but that's fine. My name is Bruno, and I'm from the Remark company ecosystem. We built NFT 2.0 multi-chain standards, and today we're going to be talking about NFT infrastructure. And I think that's really relevant to define, because it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. But before we do that, I want to hear from our panelists. I'd like to give them a chance to introduce themselves and their project so that we can dive in properly on what each of them are doing and how they're addressing this really ambiguous term that we'll have to also define during the panel. So if you want to get going, like from here to the end.
Cool.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Chris. Chris Kolzinski, crazy last name. I'm one of the original co-founders of Tinder. I helped invent the swipe. I was a co-creator of Bumble as well, and some other companies. Right now, I'm working on a company called Niche, which puts users into interest-based clubs that are organized as or structured as NFT-gated DAOs under the hood. But we obfuscate all the scary crypto stuff away and just give people a next evolution of social network.
Nice. Nate?
I'm Nate Geyer, co-founder of Mintbase. We've been building NFT applications since 2018. We're actually one of the first apps to deploy on the Graph protocol. If you go to their website, you'll still see our logo up there from old school days. And we know how painful it is to build a blockchain application. Indexers, that's a pain in the arse. You've got smart contracts, pain in the arse. You've got audits, also expensive, so that's a pain in the arse. So we just take away all of that and we say, okay, we want you to build your own marketplace away from us. We know it all works because we use it ourselves. And we're going to add an affiliate program where you can actually get 1.25% of our market fee directly if you're able to purchase any NFT on Near. And the last note is we're the only fully interoperable market on Near, where if you create your own contract, deploy it, and mint, it'll automatically show up at our indexer, where you could see a plethora of data, whether it's full provenance of tokens, this, that, and all sorts of neat things. So,
thank you.
Yeah, infrastructure.
Carissa?
I'm Carissa Winnett. I'm the VP of Operations for Few and Far Marketplace. We are a digital IP minting solution that's easy to use and seamless for most people to use. And we have the added bonus of solving the problem for royalties for creators.
Nice.
Hey everybody, my name is Austin Worrell, co-founder of Kino. I'm a 3-time tech founder with a specialization in economics and law. I went to the London School of Economics and University of Southern California Gould School of Law. So I get really jazzed about smart contracts, even though they're pretty dumb contracts currently. But the future is bright at the intersection of technology and law. At Kino, we are building and about to launch multiple films on a marketplace where fans can go behind the scenes, invest, collect, and experience A-list level films like never before, all through smart contract technology, on top of a protocol layer that is the trustless place for artists to have their IP and economic rights protected in the Hollywood industry, which is nefariously known for being one of the spaces where nobody trusts anybody else. So we're about to change that through smart blockchain technology, and we're proud to be a Near partner.
Thank you. All right. So defining NFT infrastructure is kind of is an interesting problem, especially in this mixed these mixed types of projects that we have here. Each of you probably has their own idea of it. It can be anything. Like for us at Remark, NFT infrastructure is just the standards that we've built. We don't really care about the stack underneath. We don't really care about the storage. We care about the standards and what they do and what they enable in terms of future-proofing NFTs. But for you, it might be how something is stored for the movies and how you can expand that offering in order to enrich that media. It can be IP tracking in terms of NFTs, or it can be just literally deploying an actual marketplace as a tech stack, as an infrastructure. So if you were to pick one definition of NFT infrastructure that means the most to you, that you define as NFT infrastructure, could you clarify it and why it's important for your project? We can start from the back now. Yeah.
I think trustlessness, I'm not sure if that's a word, but I think it works. For us, building out the technology that enables you to track, if you're a fan, your rights to future profits in a movie. So let's say, we're going to launch a movie with Matt. so-and-so, who my co-founder mentioned earlier that he worked with, but I'm not going to say his name. And you're like, it hits the movie theater, it did $100 million worldwide. I don't have to go to an accountant and a lawyer to know that I'm going to receive that 1% of that film I own. It's going to be trustlessly transferred to me on blockchain, right? That's a pretty cool innovation infrastructure-wise. Or if it's, I own the rights to the Batman mask in Dark Knight, that's not possible. That's already been done, for the record. Go watch Dark Knight, great movie. But if you had bought the right to that prop before it was made on Kino, it would be shipped to you afterwards. You would know that it's an authentic prop because of the infrastructure on chain, and you could have traded that right across, wow, it's getting louder, across different ecosystems through the chain, right? Or if it's even down to IP protection, like Few and Far is doing, proud to be a Few and Far partner as well. You don't have to go through all these middlemen. And so for us, I think that's what is most exciting about the technology that all of our teams are building, is that the worlds in which we live in are so congested with middlemen, be they lawyers, accountants, sometimes even engineers, that if we can build technology that we can all point to and know that's the single point of trust, that's the single point of failure, we're able to create more efficient markets, which actually then creates more opportunity for artists, individuals, consumers, et cetera.
That was awesome. I think for us, there's been 3 iterations of Web3 thus far. There's the first one, which was static websites, decentralized. Then there was centralized, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're going back to decentralized, where we own our data and we can monetize it. So the first problem, I think, what we're desperately trying to solve is integrating people seamlessly. And in order to do that, it needs to be like Facebook and Instagram, to where they don't feel the pain and the friction of logging into something, having to set up something else, having to buy something just to get to that one item that they wanted. And the second part of this, which in my personal opinion is super important, and I think you'll agree, is the creators. The creators there's a bunch of controversy going around with creator royalties. And if you look at it, most of history, art and music and everything that makes us great has been creators who've decided what society is. So protecting them so that we can continue to create beautiful music, beautiful artwork, great cinematography in movies. This is extremely important, because once we start taking that right for them to, the ability for them to earn money and them stop creating these things, we start losing a lot of our culture and what makes us great.
Okay, definition of infrastructure for me is blockchain is incredibly hard to build on top of. If you're Play Ember or Sweat, those guys just want to focus on building their app. They don't want to fire up a team of 8 people to just focus on building indexers, because indexers are really hard. We're talking about a fire hose of data that's shooting stuff all over the place. If they don't want to focus on those, we're taking those kind of difficult things away to let them focus on building their app. They're not using Mint-based, I'm just using them as an example. The main thing is, if they just want to focus on their one app, going out, getting people to get miles on their feet or do whatever, they can focus on that. We'll focus on the really complicated, low-level stuff. So that's the infrastructure play for me.
So I think for Niche, what NFTs mean for us is it represents ownership. It represents some like digital ledger of ownership. Right now we're focusing on those being your interests, your social groups, your networks. Like for me, it's like I belong to a Star Wars group, and like LA Tech people, and like a cat group, and like Poodles and Doodles in New York, and all sorts of these weird things. But in my wallet now, I have NFTs that basically have codified all my interests into a very central place. And as we look forward to it, we're trying to look through it through the consumer's eyes of like, what does an NFT mean to them? And it's, whatever stigma is attached to it now of a, picture of monkeys or Bieber paying $1 million for something, that represents absolutely like no utility to, I think, an end consumer. So like I said, we're focusing on like it being your digital membership card to your social circles. It can be an NFT that represents like an event through one of your clubs in an IRL. That gets added to your wallet too and adds to a rich history. If I'm part of this club, I went to these events. And eventually we'd like it to be a digital ledger of a physical good that you could buy, right? I'd sell a Star Wars thing online of the NFT of it. It's a smart contract between the two. They ship it to me. I complete the circle. And now that NFT goes into my wallet as a digital representation of a physical good that's in my collection, which adds, I think, to my social status of, if I'm in that specific club. So we're looking at the pragmatic uses of what an NFT means.
All right. All right, so very happy to hear that. There's a lot of innovation on top of just JPEGs here in every single project, which is great. Which brings us nicely to the next topic. Like, we are kind of, the ecosystem is kind of poisoned with this idea of NFTs just being a static piece of media right now. And it's really hard to break away from this. We at Remark try to make the standards future-proof, and so that you can, take a movie and literally mint an IP right as a PDF and put it inside of that movie NFT, or then add a subtitle file as literally another NFT into that NFT. All of that is cool, but you need to make some compromises. So what I'm wondering is, in your quest to add utility and purpose to these NFTs on your infrastructure, what sacrifices have you had to make? How do you decide between the compromise of keeping backwards compatibility with the old world of NFTs versus innovating on top of them enough to actually make them useful and no longer a meme, but a new data structure that people want to use? Yeah, I can reverse.
For us, I think it's about interoperability, where they come from, where they're going to go. And I think what they mean to people, like we said, it's not the JPEG, it's not the pixels and what's contained in it. I think it's what it means for people. And just with like current market stigma, people don't want to talk about NFTs. I'm going to market a thing, and it's NFT that. You start losing people. So when we kind of like talk about the way that these clubs are gated, we just call them membership cards. We don't talk about NFTs. We don't talk about minting. We don't talk about any Web3 really, because what we want to distill down is the value of that technology, not the technology itself, right? And I think NFT is definitely the technology, but what we want to convey is the pragmatic uses behind that.
Perfect.
Yeah, we were the first NFT marketplace to use Arweave back in the day. So decentralization is super important to us. Storage is super important to us, how we're sorting those sort of things. We launched a marketplace in 2018, and no one's really bugged me to say, you did a bad job. It's kind of telling when people in Discord say, oh, where'd that go? Oh, here's the link. It still exists, whether you go on OpenSea. So our goal is, once you mint the token and deploy it, we can shut down tomorrow and your stuff still exists. When it comes to indexing, there's definitely a trade-off. I really feel like the indexer doesn't necessarily need to be decentralized. It's just there to give us data, to organize us with where's what. If I'm going to go check in an airline, I want to see my NFT really quick, but when I actually go to, and that's the indexer, that's centralized, that's fine. But if I want to actually check in, you burn that token or do whatever it is you need to do on chain. That's the validation to do that. I mean, the trade-off is you can't do everything tomorrow, but we can slowly move that way. As long as the chain does its thing, the storage is there, then we can go nuts with decentralizing indexers. And the graph, I know, is kind of a little bit tough to work with when it gets into scale. So we've chosen to go this route. And I'm super happy of all the decisions we've made in the last 4 years. We've done it the best we possibly could, and yeah. It's off we go.
Nice.
I agree with Chris. Interoperability is a huge component of what we're trying to do, and I think NFTs are a great vehicle. If you look at Sweatcoin, which was on our marketplace, you get to earn your steps. Like your steps get recorded in real time based on holding this NFT. That is the definition of utility for having this NFT, which is the vehicle to get there. And now they've created this vast community around this incentivification, which is getting people in shape, making people feel good, and creating a community of people that support each other to further this dialogue and to further that. NFTs are not the end, they're the beginning. They may go away, they may transform, they may become something different, but they're that first integration and that first step into basically us being on the moon. And I think that working with companies like Kino, who are going to help revolutionize their industry, and working with other companies like Sweatcoin and working on Near, I think that we're starting those steps very strong.
Okay. So our CTO, David, who's somewhere here in the audience, he has a mantra that he uses with his team. We only build things that are usable, viable, and feasible. And so when you say, what do you sacrifice because we're using Web3 technology, the answer is nothing. In fact, if we're going to sacrifice anything, it's going to be the friction of Web3, and we're going to abstract that away or remove that from the system until we're ready to introduce that to the users. Film and television is a $240 billion industry. There are billions of users of entertainment. And so for us to sit here and think that I'm going to put a ton of friction in our users' faces and just hope they figure it out is something that we will never do as a company. Instead, and we have this workflow, you can go through, buy an NFT, which we, just like Chris said, we don't even use the term. You're going to buy a behind-the-scenes pass, which my mom will never even know is on the blockchain, and that's beautiful. However, my best friend Jake, who loves Web3, will know it's on the blockchain, right? And so we meet users where they're at. And so we have a workflow where if you want to export to blockchain and use all the values and benefits that blockchain has to offer, you can. But if you don't want to and you just want to live in the Kino ecosystem, because that's where you want to live and you just want to buy a behind-the-scenes pass and get a little action on how the movie was made, that's great, you know? And so I think it's finding, you know, we talk about progressive decentralization in the near ecosystem, Web 2.5. I think it's finding that good hybrid mix between slowly, progressively showing users the future is bright. Blockchain is actually empowering you. It's protecting your rights. It's making things possible that weren't previously possible, but not putting too much in people's faces that they shut down and they get scared and then they're not using our products, because then we're not actually doing anything for the whole Web3 ecosystem in general.
Right.
I have one more thing to add to the interoperability. Okay, so we should feel super proud on Near that we have over 2,000 contracts interacting with each other. That means all of these folks who control their own contracts, some can upgrade, some can't. Someone who lists on my market, ASAC, I can't touch their market because they control it. I just found out on Solana, their entire NFT ecosystem, I'm pretty sure, is just one smart contract. Let that digest. Mike, you have Metaplex, who's able to update everybody's one contract. This was verified by Dragos, who's the DApp Radar guy. Like, tell me that's not a huge trade-off that we should feel super proud about. So I encourage everyone to research that and prove me wrong. I'm happy to be proved wrong, but go forth.
Yeah, that's a pretty hefty accusation there. We'll have to look into it. Yeah, on the topic of like centralization and decentralization, I've always been kind of an extremist in terms of ideals of blockchain, and like I've been pestering my team about something that I like to call progressive centralization, where you start off with a really bad UX UI, where everything's slow, but it reads directly from the chain. We don't really care much about, you know, we don't really bother much with storage because our NFTs, they have multimedia capabilities. So you can just have redundancy built into the NFT, so you can go Arweave and IPFS and whatever. But in terms of just reading the data, you need to be able to use it even if all the indexers are offline, even if all the centralized and commercial apps are offline, even if everything goes down. I just want the experience to be bad, but possible. And so then add an indexer on top and have your app check, is the indexer live? Yes, okay, then take that data. So how, like, and we all also know when you have especially a VC invested or you know, a commercially oriented startup or company, the goal is ultimately to exit. The goal is ultimately to be acquired or do something like that. And so we all know what happens to those companies. They usually get killed off by the competition that acquires them. So what I'm wondering is, how important is decentralization to you in terms of longevity of the project? Like, what would happen if the niche team disappeared tomorrow? Would I still be able to get into my DAO community somehow? Mm-hmm. Or would I basically be stranded in my community?
Yeah, I mean, when you create that data exists and persists forever, regardless of niche. I mean, it's yours, it's in your wallet. That NFT belongs to you. Like, we can't take it away. Specifically, how it pertains to us is like what that NFT grants you as far as permissions. Mm-hmm. So as long as there's a club that exists that is structured as a DAO, you might not be able to like add more stuff to it. Let's say if niche should just go away, mm-hmm. but you could absolutely take that DAO, put it on another thing, and still keep rolling because you've all got the NFT, which inherently grants permission to that.
So it should be reasonably easy to just build an alternative client that plugs into the same NFTs that everybody has, or the same DAO?
I think that's like our end goal, right? Mm-hmm. We're starting with a consumer product, obviously, yep. But our end goal is to build a lean protocol off of that and then be able to whitelist it for like larger groups to like power, like the Soho House app powered by Niche Protocol that then interoperates with all the communities on niche, all the communities that are also powered by the niche token.
Awesome. And Nate, you mentioned Arweave as your starting storage provider. Are you still using Arweave?
Yep.
Why did you choose Arweave?
Okay, so we started with IPFS, obviously, and it was just a pain in the arse. It was the file discovery was insane. You would ping a thing, and then your page would load maybe in like 8 or 9 minutes, like one minute per each ping. Then we're like, okay, well, what's pinning? What does that mean? And then you start to realize, okay, we can use Pinata, we have to pay them, but if we stop paying them, then all your files go down, and all of a sudden you're like, well, hell, why don't we just use Firestore? It's the same thing. We pay money, we keep it up. What's the difference? So with Arweave, it's definitely this neat endowment mechanism where you put money into a system, and then other nodes are incentivized to basically keep your stuff up for, they say, 200 years. And they even have like a mild GDPR compliant theory where every node can kind of say, we're GDPR compliant, so if you want to take it down from our node, you can, but then it sends signals and everyone else goes, oh man, maybe we should put it up. It's a fascinating world. Yep.
Interesting. And you're feeling reasonably safe that, you know, it won't suffer from a fate like Thea or, you know, just something other cataclysmic?
Yeah, it's deep. But another point to what if we go away tomorrow? So you're messing around with near social and BOSS and those sort of things. Microchip GNU has been really messing around with that stuff. Fascinating, right? It's we're creating minting applications on BOSS. So you don't have to use Mintbase to mint stuff. We can build the exact same kind of mechanics on BOSS. So this is where we're like, cool, we have mintbase.xyz, you can go do stuff, but really you can build it on whatever it is you want. It's all accessing the blockchain. So that's the future we're jumping into and getting weird with.
That's super interesting. So we are running a bit short on time, but I do want to cover another question here, and that's related to royalties that you mentioned before. To me, it's a very clear-cut picture. Like if a creator wants royalties, we give them royalties. That's it. There's no like this grift that people keep removing this in order just to get users. Is to me quite poisonous for the industry. But it's a very tricky problem when you go further than just flat media files. Because when you have, for example, like in our case, I don't know, a game avatar that contains a backpack, that contains a jacket, that on itself contains a patch, and each of those is an NFT contained in another NFT, and the patch has a different royalty and recipient and percentage than the other stuff, you can't just sum it up. It doesn't work. You have to have a very intricate structure of how to define this in a way that won't let the seller of the avatar basically rug the designer of the patch, so that people have incentive to design the patches and still get royalty. I'm wondering how are you looking at the royalties of just generally your NFTs in your ecosystem as they expand in functionality? How are you going to combat that current anti-royalty movement and also spin it into this like rich NFT royalty style system?
Well, I mean, like the example you just gave, I smile at having a background in law because that's not a new problem, right? Lawyers have solved that many times. Now, it's very expensive, it's very inefficient, it's very clunky, and it's probably would have been a 100-page contract with 10 different parties involved, right? So the dream is, how do we work together with my background in law and your background in engineering to sit down and say, hey, how can we create a templatized contract that can handle 10 different parties, 10 different royalty streams, and it's so easy that my little sister could walk off the street, design a patch, and she could input her rights into a smart contract without having any engineering or legal knowledge, right? And so that's the future that we need to build towards, is smart contracts that are natural language processing, compatible, so that way normal users could sit down and I can say, hey, I created this amazing, beautiful piece of artwork, I want to sell it, and I want to charge 5% royalties, and I have the ability to dictate that in the smart contract. Or when it gets more complex, business teams can sit down and figure those things out, right? So that's one angle. The other angle, too, is just that we don't right now have the sort of meeting of the real world with the Web3 world, right? And so unfortunately, we're kind of in a tough position where we have a lot of tech that is, saying that we're protecting rights or the opposite, unfortunately. But then you get into the real world and the contracts aren't actually matching what was, put on chain. And so that's something we need to work hard on. And it's something we do as a team is every single one of our assets has an actual legal contract. It's a PDF that's attached. And that's just an intermediate step. Eventually, all of that is going to be put into smart contract metadata. It's going to be put into action commands that can then be if-then statements that can actually trigger certain transactions and responses, but we are nowhere near close to that yet. Like any of the standards in the NFT marketplaces that you see right now aren't even close. And then we have the competing terms of service, like in OpenSea's, for example, not to call them out, that says, oh wait, any of those royalties, we can just not enforce them, right? And so we have so much complexity both on the engineering side and the legal side that we need a lot of idealistic visionaries, I think like all of us here on stage, to sit together and say, all right, how do we solve this? How do we make it technologically feasible? How do we make it practically feasible? And how do we keep the user's best foot forward and the creators at the end of the day? I would argue that I don't think there's an anti-royalty movement generally. Like I don't think the whole world wants to all of a sudden screw over creators. I do think that users don't want to pay a ton for art in some ways, that people want to get a deal. I don't necessarily blame them, but I think that people generally do want artists to be paid fairly. So for us, we bake it in every one of our legal contracts and our technology, and I think our companies just have to lead, and we have to show that that is the right thing, and that's what the market demands, and users will follow.
Yeah. I think the goal is what we're doing, which is empowering the user, empowering the creator. Like we're writing in those royalties in the smart contract. So as the legal services catch up to what we're writing with smart contracts, and we can work hand in hand, realistically, as someone who's a lawyer, you know that when someone writes a script, they have a bunch of legal documents that they have to sign that says they wrote this original IP. Now, if we have a smart contract that goes and coincides with that, as this contract's changing, evolving, and growing, we can actually, and with programmable NFTs, as they grow and evolve, as more people get cut into, we can program these into the smart contracts and allow the contract to do it for us, which is what we're building at Few and Far, which is why working with someone like Kino allows us the opportunity to bring the legal age into Web3 in a way that's kind and not problematic, but it also allows us the insight of understanding what the capabilities of smart contracts are, what the limitations are, and how to create that hard, tangible copy of a contract that protects the user via the law, and what our smart contracts can actually physically do for the creator, for the user, and distribute that royalty correctly.
Yeah. Nate, your users can create marketplaces for them. Do they have some sort of royalty on-off switch, or do you enforce a default there?
So we were part of the creation of the standard way back in 2020. Blackbox.art pushed us to get them into the standard. Our theory behind behind royalties pushing them into the standards is make it easily accessible, allowing people to pop it in there so that markets can easily check it, and then use markets that obey by the royalty standards. So it's you can use it, you might not use it. We also have one-time split fees where you can do payouts just for one time, not the reoccurring times. We're very pro royalty enforcement if we're able to figure out how to do it in an interoperable way, right? Our marketplace literally just figured out interoperability like 4 weeks ago. Like, it's hard. It's super hard. So now that we have that, we can start thinking about how can we solve this problem on an ecosystem-wide. You can create tooling where you can send an NFT into a thing. I'll shut up now. I think we're almost done.
Nice. Thank you. And last but not least, how does Niche handle royalties, like for these passes and so on? Is this ingrained?
Yeah. So the club owners, when you would start your club, decide if you want to monetize it or not, and you can choose if you want an upfront an initial purchase price, or you could do like a recurring fee structure if you want to have dues that are recurring every month. Basically, right now that's all we're playing with, but it'll get a little more sophisticated as we go.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you all for paying attention, and we'll all be around if you want to talk to us. Cheers.